Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting tonight's show. Up first here, hazardous weather graphic. Winter storm warnings remain out tonight through tomorrow here for the Seward Peninsula and the north coast there. Shishmaref eastward here into the Kobuk Valley, and then back across Selkirk Valley, Kotzebue, right up the coast there, Noatak Valley, Kivalina, on up to right around the Point Hope, Cape Lisburne area. Look for continued whiteout conditions at times, like Kotzebue is seeing this afternoon, with winds gusting 50 miles an hour, snow and blowing snow. Heaviest snowfall amounts anywhere from 6 to 12 inches occurring on the southern slopes of the Brooks Range here, and lesser amounts down to the south, but the combined wind will keep visibilities down under a quarter mile at times through tomorrow afternoon. Winter weather advisories here for the Galena area, right on down the Yukon River Valley out to the Delta, and that's for tonight and tomorrow too, for visibilities in snow and blowing snow, or snow and blowing snow to reduce visibilities to about a half mile or less at times there, with winds gusting 40 miles an hour, maybe a little stronger out along the coast. Winter weather advisory also out, or more of a wind advisory up here for the eastern North Slope area, the northeastern Brooks Range. Winds gusting anywhere from 25 to 40 miles an hour or so up through here, and that could create some low visibilities and blowing and drifting snow up in that area, but those winds diminish as you head out toward the coastline, so it's mostly back up in the northeastern Brooks Range area. And moving on to satellite imagery, you can see system here moving northward, aloft, upper system here, surface low just east of the Pribilofs, right in about that position, traveling northward along this slow-moving frontal boundary that's gradually creeping eastward into the western interior areas, and in more showery conditions back out to the west. And the main low center, the parent low, lifting up toward the Russian Far East coast. But high pressure here holding over in western Canada, keeping the eastern interior dry with some sunshine there from the Tanana Valley right down to the eastern North Gulf Coast, and some clouds developing here off the northeast coast, some of that getting into the northern panhandle areas like Yakutat over to about Elfin Cove, with some scattered showers mostly off the coast. That's due to a weak upper level system dropping southeastward into the eastern Gulf. That's the one that came across yesterday and brought a little bit of light snow to southern Alaska and the southeast interior, has now really weakened at least a portion of its drop down into the Gulf. Otherwise, southeast coast here, sunshine and dry conditions once again. Out to the west here, we got the pretty good wind. Whoop, one too far. Warmer temperatures, of course, rainfall, Alaska Peninsula, up to about 0.8 of an inch falling at King Cove in the last 12 hours or so. Otherwise, about 1/3 of an inch falling at Cape Newenham and Cold Bay, with the snow and blowing snow increasing here in the colder temperatures across the Seward Peninsula and areas up on to the northwest coast, with winds at Kotzebue gusting 45 miles an hour during the afternoon hours, while Tin City and Point Hope seeing gusts of 50 miles an hour. Cape Lisburne earlier today had a gust to 70 miles per hour, and those winds are going to continue into tonight and then slowly diminish tomorrow. Otherwise, eastern North Slope here, you can see the tighter gradient there on the north side of this 1,038 millibar high. That's mostly along the northeastern Brooks Range. They're getting 25, 35 mile an hour wind gusts there. And then this next northward moving low coming right up toward the Pribilofs. Strongest winds to the east of that, mostly out of the southeast here. Cold Bay seeing gusts 55 miles an hour, as well as Cape Newenham, 55 mile an hour wind gusts. And this low will continue to track northward during the night tonight. And this whole strong southerly wind flow. This is the last system that'll have that, as the next systems are going to track eastward along the Aleutians. So the prolonged period of strong southerly winds is about to end out here over the Bering Sea, especially the northern Bering Sea. Otherwise, for tonight, that low does track northward here to just, still south of St. Lawrence Island a ways off the Yukon Delta coast. Front pushes inland, snow and blowing snow, worst conditions in advance of the front, right up into the northwest interior. Those winter storm warnings remain out. Stays breezy over the eastern north slope. High pressure here holding over Canada, continuing to dominate the central and eastern interior. Just variable clouds coming eastward there. Dry down to the North Gulf Coast. And these showers will stay off the coast of the Panhandle, possibly all of the clouds as well. So it'll stay mostly clear, a little breezy. Lynn Canal, 25-knot winds out of the north there. But southerly flow on the other side of this ridge axis here over the northeast Pacific. That'll bring some moisture up even to Kodiak Island. Weak trough here. Could see some light rain showers or so. And some of that might even reach the southern Kenai Peninsula areas. Otherwise, out to the west, scattered snow showers. Not too bad. A couple of troughs caught up in some westerly flow here coming across the Aleutians, drying out there under the ridge axis out towards Chimney and Attu. And you can just see the hints at the next storm that's about to make an appearance into the western Aleutians there tomorrow afternoon, bringing gale force winds back into the far western Aleutians there. Ridging ahead of that brings fair weather into the Adak-Atka area. This low continues to track northward and slowly weaken a little bit, not too much though. And this is going to hang the front up across the western interior areas. But precipitation should advance eastward, at least across Kuskokwim Valley into the western Alaska Range. Possibly could see some light snow tomorrow, maybe some light mixed precipitation, southern Cook Inlet and Kamishak Bay. Rain, Kodiak Island, and eastern interior. Another mostly sunny day from the eastern Arctic coast right on down into the northeast Gulf of Alaska, and sunshine all the way down across the Panhandle as well. As that huge area high pressure now starting to pull off to the east on the center, but we still have a ridge aloft over the eastern interior, at least for tomorrow. And this system slowly moving eastward here. It's going to get hung up over the central interior, it looks like, on Wednesday, but it's going to be much weakened with a weak low coming up along that boundary there near or just east of Kodiak Island. Periods of light rain, fog there, and mixed precipitation southern Cook Inlet. Just showers along this part of the front that's up along the Alaska Range. Some of that could spill in to the western Susitna Valley, but whatever it does will be quite light. You can see a lot less wind and a lot lighter snowfall and a lot better visibility conditions or flying conditions here up in the northwest there, but still some periods of light snow. Could see several more inches on the southern slopes of the Brooks Range here, especially the west side into the DeLong Mountains. Improving here, weak ridging coming in, still some isolated showers. Also could see some clearing mixed in with that. Sunshine, Nunivak Island, on down to Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula. Intense 954 millibar low with gale and storm force winds comes up somewhere between Kiska Island and Shemya during the afternoon on Wednesday, and the front pushing eastward now. So winds increasing over the Pribilofs with rain and snow, rain pushing into the Fox Islands. Looks like now this system will track due east and weaken, so that's going to put more of an east-northeast wind flow up here over the northern Bering Sea into the Bering Strait. Lows for tonight, 5 to 15 below here over the eastern interior. Single numbers above zero on the eastern Arctic coast to lower 20s on the west side. Right around 30 for the Seward Peninsula. Lower 30s here across the southwest to mid-30s Bristol Bay. Lower 30s for the Aleutians. And 10 to 23 for the Panhandle. Highs for tomorrow near 20, Copper River Basin, eastern interior. Single numbers up in the northeast. And mid-40s down here over Bristol Bay. Highs 30, 35, south central Alaska, and 35 to 40 for the Panhandle. Lows the following morning looking like this. A little milder here, teens to mid-20s for this Panhandle area. Still below zero, Copper River Basin and the eastern interior, 5 to 15 below. In the mid-20s here in the west, teens on the Arctic coast, lower 30s over the Alaska Peninsula. Highs the following afternoon, 15 to 20 east, 30 to 35 in the west.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Flying weather graphic for Tuesday morning. Lots of IFR out here, eastern northeast Bering Sea, Bering Strait, northwest coast here all the way down into northwestern Bristol Bay. Some IFR there along the south side of the Alaska Peninsula. There's marginal for Kodiak, areas of marginal VFR, central interior kind of dissipates off to the east. It stays VFR over the central Aleutians and the southeast coast. That holds into tomorrow afternoon as well. VFR here again, the Panhandle, eastern Gulf of Alaska, right up across Copper River Basin, Tanana Valley, all the way up to the eastern Arctic coast, with IFR back here to the west, extending, all of the west coast here, and actually pushing inland, so we're bringing out to marginal here along the Kuskokwim Delta coast on down to the Alaska Peninsula with VFR for the peninsula here, the western Alaska Peninsula. Fox Islands to about Atka, up to the Pribilof, some good VFR there, and then more IFR with the next storm out west. And for Wednesday morning, that makes a pretty good jog here to the east and northeast, all the way to Atka, covering the southwest Bering there. A break right through here, more IFR, pretty well entrenched here, western interior areas from Kodiak Island, maybe southern Cook Inlet, definitely in the Kuskokwim Valley, right on up the west side there to the Arctic coast and along the southern slopes of the Brooks Range. Marginal VFR over to the border, but the Panhandle staying in the VFR zone. That continues through Wednesday as well. Another VFR day here for all of the southeast coast, up into the North Gulf Coast, Copper River Basin, central and east side there, and then a much narrow area up over the 40-mile country, IFR along and south of the Brooks Range from the western upper Yukon Valley across the Koyukuk, Kobuk into the northwest, back up around the Arctic coast. Some IFR possible here over the western Susitna Valley on up to Denali Park, otherwise marginal. Cook Inlet, that working into Prince William Sound, back to the west, more IFR out over the Bering Sea with a weak system right through here, and then another one farther back to the west. Passes Anatuvik, some moisture on the increase there and to the west, so I'll go marginal VFR for that pass, but again off to the east a little bit. You should stay VFR the entire day. Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR turning toward IFR conditions throughout the afternoon. Rainy, marginal. Windy though, be good VFR. Isabel VFR as well as Mentesta, remaining VFR, and Tanita VFR. Portage VFR becoming marginal as some moisture slips up from the south and southeast. Otherwise Chilkoot and White VFR for another couple of days. And for the freezing levels here at the surface, north of the Pribilof, but back south of St. Matthew Island, in across northern Bristol Bay, hugging the North Gulf Coast and mostly the outer coastline of the Panhandle, 2,000 feet well south of Kodiak and even south of the west central Aleutians. Icing one swath here with that front hanging up now over the interior areas, so just some isolated areas of moderate rime icing with this, mostly on the light side, areas of back to the northwest coast there. Some of that slipping over the Kenai Peninsula and into Cook Inlet, maybe this is Susitna Valley, but nothing central and east side, nothing for the Panhandle. More icing poised to move into the western Aleutians late tomorrow. Jet stream, there's a storm associated with that next batch coming in, ridging ahead of that, trough along the coast, south to north flow here, upper ridge holding over the eastern interior through tomorrow, and offshore flow continues through the Panhandle, so another good day there, but gradually this pattern's trying to edge its way eastward, slower doing it than what we thought earlier, but it eventually will. And for 9,000 feet, low pulling northward there and toward the Bering Strait, south to north flow, 30 to 40 knots, strongest here over the Yukon Delta, about 20 knots Cook Inlet, lighter 10 to 15 knot winds to the east, and even lighter than that, 5 to 15 also for the Panhandle. Next system bringing in some pretty good winds, 45 to 65 knots west of Adak. And 3,000 feet out there, again 25 for Atka, say by tomorrow afternoon, increasing upwards of 80 miles an hour out toward the western Aleutians. Otherwise, this low here, St. Lawrence Island, westerlies 25 to 30 into the southwest coast, south to north flow here, 25 to 40 over the west central interior. Turbulence, widespread moderate chop here, Kodiak Island, up across southern Cook Inlet, Kamishak Bay, much of the southwest interior, right on up into Kotzebue Sound and out over the far western Aleutians.
Hello again, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. And joining us again, talking about the Augmented Reality Sandbox, is Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. And he's actually talking about a project from AKwx, which is the experimental program to stimulate competitive research. A lot of acronyms, but some really fun stuff today, right, Eric?
You bet. We've got a learning tool that is a tool that's fun to use, and it really has a relevance to actually daily lives of anyone who goes outside and sees lumpy topography in Alaska. We've got a lot of mountains and such. You know, when I was younger and go on your first hike in the hills, say, you're given, maybe you're in the Boy Scouts or you get at the kiosk at the trailhead, a topographic map, a flat piece of paper with all these lines on it, bullseyes, long lines that curve back on themselves, say, perhaps things that look like this. A quadrangle or a topographic map. We've got here just to illustrate a couple of examples near Denali. Alaska has so much topography, so many mountains. And what are all these lines that we see? It can be tough to know what this means the first time you look at it. What we've got, all these lines represent lines of where the elevation of the topography goes through a certain level above sea level, say that this line represents where the mountains have gone from below 1,000 feet, mean sea level, up through 1,000 feet and above. That's your 1,000-foot contour. And when the mountain keeps going up, you're up to 1,200 feet, 1,400 feet, and so on. And that's how you get this little bullseye around the peak of a mountain.
Kind of makes layered slices, right?
Kind of like layered slices. Nice way to look at that. And when you see the lines are closer together, you're going up more steeply. If the mountain rises more slowly, it takes you longer in horizontal space to go through those different vertical increments. So
that is really hard to visualize.
Right. Imagine you're looking at a 2D piece of paper, two-dimensional piece of paper, but you're trying to understand what the three-dimensional world looks like. Well, enter the augmented reality sandbox. Yes, what is that? It is right here. We have the sandbox with us today, Sandbox 2.0, portable version.
Sweet.
Built up at University of Alaska Fairbanks. And we've got a couple of folks helping out today.
Let's see, Alana Valaji, and she's a mechanical engineering student from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. If you want to give us a thumbs up there, Alana, thanks for helping us out today. And Courtney Brees, she's the outreach coordinator from AKwx, also helping us out today. Thanks, Courtney.
And this tool here has a Microsoft Kinect to sense the level of sand in this sandbox. And then the Kinect feeds its information into a computer that then sends a signal to a projector to draw the appropriate topographic lines on this topography. The fun thing about this, as we can see here, is that the sandbox and its Kinect and its projector, they all work as a team. So here we've got a mountain in the middle of the sandbox. What if we took down the mountain to some degree? Watch as the software responds and redraws the topography.
Kind of a caldera forming there.
There you go, And what's fun about the sandbox too is it knows that gravity flows downhill, and we've got some water that's actually down in the lowest elevations. And what's happening now is we're making it rain a little bit. We'll fill up rain into that elevated lake bed, that caldera, as you said. And so now water is pooled up there. And what if you gouged out an outlet channel?
Glacial dam release.
There you go. The water flows out. What we're seeing here is a tool that allows people to touch and connect, Microsoft Connect, RRR, to connect two-dimensional topographic maps like what we have here, these flat things on a piece of paper, to the real three-dimensional world. I think this Sandbox's real particular application as a learning tool to young people is, what does a two-dimensional map mean when it's trying to represent the three-dimensional world? This sandbox is kind of both at once. It's actually three-dimensional, lumpy topography there, the sand, but it's got these lines drawn on the three-dimensional sand that would be on a two-dimensional piece of paper.
Wow, that is a huge leap from the learning that we experienced when we were younger to how children and even adults are visualizing in these new forms of technology. Allows that to kind of reshape their thinking and visualize this in a very useful and absolutely hands-on way. It's amazing.
It's a hands-on tool, and
it's hard for me to sit here and not go play with that.
Well, that's what happened at GINA, up at the University of Alaska in Fairbanks, when the first model was being made, the prototype with plywood and such. We had professional adult professor types had heard about this, and they came by because they wanted to see how it worked.
Okay.
And everyone becomes that idealistic, wonder-filled youngster.
Sure.
And you just can't help but play with that, and to see how it reacts in time, and
Right.
it's a dynamic learning tool, and it
Dynamic,
responds.
That's exactly the word.
And
Yeah.
you wonder what applicabilities beyond a teaching
Right.
tool for
Where does it
topography
go?
can it have. You can see how in Alaska we have inundation mapping is an issue. If you had water slosh inland, say in a coastal flooding event
Right.
on the western coast of Alaska or the Arctic coast, you could see this. The concept is illustrated here as an introductory learning method. I think this is a potentially good outreach tool for all of us in Alaska.
Okay, so not only just a topographical sense, a mapping sense, maybe something that leads into understanding of how geographic information systems work with GIS, but also geology, if we wanted to get into kind of the formations and the bigger land masses and the representation of the 2D map. We could go into hydrology, which is very important in Alaska, of course. And even just understanding the weather sense. Mounding up a big pile of sand could be that Arctic high pressure system sitting on top of Fairbanks, and the voids would be low pressure systems. This can go a lot of different directions.
Yes, exactly. It's not just landforms, but pressure has contours of high pressure and low pressure. And I wish I had had this kind of a learning tool when I was taking
kidding.
Meteorology 101 back 25 years ago.
wow.
Would have been helpful, I think.
Probably would have gotten a better grade, yeah. Okay, thank you so much for coming by, Eric, and Alana and Courtney, thank you so much for your help there in the sandbox. We are going to play in the sandbox a little bit more coming up tomorrow on our next edition of Alaska Weather Facts. We hope you join us for that. In the meantime, make sure you go to alaska.edu/EPSCOR. That's alaska.edu EPSCOR to learn more information about what we're doing with this augmented reality sandbox around Alaska. We'll see you next time on Alaska Weather Facts.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis. Not much different from yesterday. Actually, a little bit less here in the way of any heavier ice north of St. Lawrence Island and into Norton Sound. Hardly anything down along the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta coastline. It looks like the southerly winds that you have today here along the coast, that's about it when they end here over the next day or so. That'll be it for the south wind conditions there, and they're going to go more easterly to northeasterly, maybe even in a week's time back to northerly through here. So moving on, coastal water forecast, south coast of the Panhandle, east-northeast 10 to 15 knots, and east-northeast at 10 here for the north coast, north 30 knots. Good small craft advisories again tomorrow for northern Link Canal, north at about 20 for Stevens Passage, and north at 10 for Clarence Strait. Moving ahead to the outlook for Wednesday, north winds 25 knots coming up here on the south coast of the Panhandle, northwest 20 for the north coast. Small craft advisories, north 25, Lynn Canal, otherwise Stevens Passage and Clarence Strait, north at 15 with 3-foot seas. And for Prince William Sound, light southeast winds tomorrow at 10, seas just 2 feet. Variable to northeast at about 10 knots here for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Southeast 15 for the western zone, and small craft advisory southeast winds for the Barren Islands, 25 knots, right on up into Kamishak Bay. South of the Forelands, Cook Inlet, northeast at 20, a little lighter for northern Cook Inlet. And then on Wednesday, northeast, 10 to 15 knots with 2 to 3 foot seas here for Cook Inlet, and easterlies at 20 for Kamishak Bay, southeast 20 for the Barrens, and westerlies, light westerlies for the western North Gulf Coast, and maybe 15 knots over toward Middleton Island. Prince William Sound, light west breeze at 10. Kodiak Island, southeast 25 knots tomorrow, and 30-knot winds from Sitkinak to Castle Cape. Then we go westerly here. Bristol Bay, west winds breaking in tomorrow afternoon at 25 knots, and west 25 for the Alaska Peninsula. Wednesday here, 30 to 35 knot winds coming up to gale force here south or the Pacific side of the peninsula. Just 15 knots in the forecast for Bristol Bay on Wednesday, and southwest 15 up the east side of Kodiak Island, while Shelikof Strait will be looking at northerlies at about 15 knots. And moving out to the Fox Islands for tomorrow, west winds 25, good for small craft advisories there with 9 to 13 foot seas. Central Aleutians, same forecast, west 25, 8 to 13 foot seas. And then good gales coming back in, almost storm force, but not quite, at least by tomorrow afternoon. East 45, Kiska to Shimea, and Shimea over toward Adak. Southeast increasing to 40 knots, seas building to 13 feet. Outlook for Wednesday, here come the storms here with the tight pressure gradient with the main low and then associated front here. So we got quite an area from about Kiska eastward to Nikolsky of south winds at 50 knots with seas up to 30, 39 feet. And southeast 45 knots for Unalaska Island with 14 to 20 foot seas. Up the west coast tomorrow, west or south-southwest 15 to 20 here along the southwest coast, south 20 for St. Lawrence Island, and southeast 25 for Norton Sound, west 25 for the Pribilofs, northwest 20 St. Matthew Island. And then for the next day, big gales coming in toward the Pribilofs south, increasing to 40 knots for St. Paul and St. George, St. Matthew east, increasing to 45 knots. See more of an easterly wind now with this next system as it stays to the south. Light winds out of the northwest for St. Lawrence Island. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, eastern and central coast, actually the entire coast, southeast 10 knots. From Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson, east at 15, and then Cape Thompson south to Wales, southeast 35 knots. And then those will swing around to the west, really drop off, west-northwest 15 here for the Chukchi Sea, southwest 10 to 15 for the west side, and the central coast, eastern Beaufort Sea coast looking south at 10. And for tonight, winter weather or winter storm warning remains out for the Seward Peninsula into the Kobuk Valley, back to Kotzebue and up into the northwest coast and the Noatak Valley through tomorrow for near whiteout conditions, winds gusting 40, 55 miles an hour and snow and blowing snow there. And winter weather advisories through tomorrow for the Yukon Delta up the valley there and also for the eastern Brooks Range area. Rain and snow here for the southwest, mostly Bristol Bay. Stays dry over the interior and the Panhandle. Tomorrow, another sunny day for the southeast coast. And that front edges eastward on Wednesday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.